the world. So the time zones on this one were not insignificant. I'm going to let each of the authors tell you where they're from when they introduce themselves. But we've got Cara Hogarth, Fil Reid, Alanna Lucas, Jenny Hartwell, and E.L. Johnson with us this week. Ladies, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Okay. So we're going to go in reverse order this week, and we're going to start with the books that release at the end of the week and work our way back through time because this time travel thing is all in my mind. And because Phil's book is a time travel book, Phil's book is The Warrior Queen, and it's part of the Guinevere series. Phil, can you tell us about it?
Well, it's part of a 6-book series, and unlike a lot of the books on Dragonblade, it's a 6-book series about the same people all the time, and it's covers 20 years altogether. So in the first book, the heroine, who is a librarian, from the 21st century, falls back in time to the Dark Ages, where she's destined to become queen to King Arthur. I mean, she's Guinevere. There's a little bit of which came first, the chicken or the egg, because she's named after Queen Guinevere. She's called Gwen, but she's named after herself, it turns out. And to begin with, of course, she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to stay there, and she's pretty annoyed that Merlin makes her stay there. But she realizes she loves Arthur. So in the second book, she has a baby, and there are exciting things happen, and this is the third book goes further. It's called The Sword, and at the end of the third book, which is the prequel, which is the one that comes before this one, they've just drawn the sword from the stone. Or I say Arthur's drawn it, but she had a big hand in it, because right at the back in book 1, she told Merlin, when she was a bit cross with Merlin, and she said, no, I don't make him the king of legend, you do, because you put a sword in a stone. So Merlin clicks onto that, and he puts a sword in a stone.
Yeah, it's a chicken and an egg thing.
Yes. So she's made the legend happen, because she can't believe that she can be anything to do with how Arthur becomes the king of legend. But in actual fact, when you get to the end of the books, because book 6 brings it to a conclusion, you will find out that she has a huge hand in everything. Because in book 1, she's only covers about 6 weeks, and she's very much goes along on the flow and hasn't got much agency because she's new and she doesn't understand anything. But by the time book 2 comes along and she's had a baby, now there's an heir for King Arthur, and there's battles and things, and she sees her first battle. And in book 3, Arthur pulls the sword from the stone in a very dramatic ending. But book 4, Warrior Queen, she's really coming into her own, because she's done things like she's killed a man. Yeah, she kills a man in book 2, a real nasty villain who is attacking another woman. So
he needed it.
She has her own sword, and in book 4, it's called Warrior Queen because she becomes, during the book, it's not really a spoiler, Arthur is off because he's always campaigning, because there are so many people attacking Britain. So he's off in Wales. I mean, you can't call it Wales because it wasn't called Wales in those days. So it's difficult to get my way around calling places. So it's really handy because Gwen can think, oh, and of course that's Wales nowadays in the 21st century. So he's off in Wales, and of course there's no communication method. So when she gets a request for help in the north of England, she's the one who's left behind. She has to go and find Arthur, and she ends up actually rescuing people. I'm not giving away too much, but she ends up in a battle. The battle list, because the Arthurian legend has so many angles to it. I mean, there's the romance, but this is not romance. He's not wearing plate armor. They don't live in castles. They live in hill forts and in what's left of Roman Britain. And one of the most famous things, which is very much disputed, is by a monk called Nennius, who was writing in the 820 AD. And he wrote a list of Arthur's 12 battles, which is very disputed. I mean, nobody knows where any of them were. There's lots of ideas about where they were, or if any of them were true. Rather suspiciously, in the original, they rhyme. So you tend to think, they rhyme, they might not be real. But because it's so well known, and it's a real nice thing to fix a story around and to build a story around, that's what I've built the story around, which is actually quite difficult because she's a woman. And how many battles can she see or be in? Well, there's a few.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, in this one, she ends up in York, because there's a famous battle called the Battle of the City of the Legion. And there were 3 cities of the Legion in Britain at that time. There was Caerleon, which is still called Caerleon nowadays. There's Chester, which Caerleon's quite a Roman name. And there was York. They were all cities of the Legion. And most people think that it was in Caerleon or Chester. I think it was in York, because that's the side of England, of Britain, that the Saxons were attacking, because they were coming across and invading from that side. So I've put it in York. It's nice to be able to choose. It's quite often in historical novels you can't, because it's a matter of record, isn't it? And nobody knows. So you can do what you want.
And you already have the built-in power of the legend, because the Arthurian legend is something that I think everybody gets, has really strong feelings about.
Book 5 is going to sort of centre on the quest for Excalibur, because there are two swords. People think that Excalibur is the sword in the stone, but it's not. The sword in the stone is the sword in the stone. Excalibur is the sword that is held up out of the lake by the Lady of the Lake, with her hand sticking up out of the water. That's book 5. And then book 6 is called The Road to Avalon, because that is how we end up at Avalon and legend in the end. I hope you'll be interested in finding out what happens, because I really like the way I've brought the legend in there.
Oh, I'm totally interested. I was a huge Marion Zimmer Bradley fan, and The Mists of Avalon is like just one of my most favorites. So The Lady in the Lake and the sword is awesome. Well, that sounds like just a really lovely journey to get to go on with them. And I love when you were sending me bits and pieces of the blurb, the idea that she knows how many battles there are, like counting down to the end. And all along throughout the whole thing, she's falling in love with a man, and she knows enough of the history to know where the doom points are. And that adds, significant stakes to the relationship and to the story as well. So,
and she knows the man that will bring him to his doom is Arthur's nephew, who is a little boy in it. And when she's there when the baby's born, and she thinks, should I have done something? Should I have killed him as a baby? Because you would if it was Adolf Hitler. Well, you wouldn't, because it would be a baby, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And she knows this man is going to be evil, but she doesn't know if it's true or not. She thinks it might be a legend, and it might not be true. So she watches him grow, and he does grow up to be an adult eventually.
Yeah, that's like, how do you get attached? Oh, my goodness. Those are some significant stakes. So, well, that sounds like huge fun. And that's the one that comes out. It comes out the day that this airs. So if you're watching us, you can go get it live, because it will be available then and there. Okay. So the next book that we had launching this week, if we're working our way backwards, is E.L. Johnson's book, and it's The Deadly Debutante. And bad things always happen to. we have murders. So this is book 4 in the perfect poison murders. Is that right?
Right. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about this one?
Sure. And hi, thanks for having me. My accent might be a bit weird because I'm from Boston, but I'm coming to you from Hertfordshire because I've been living in the UK for quite a number of years now. But yeah, this is book 4 in the Perfect Poison series. So it stars Poppy Morton. She's a young 19-year-old girl. She's really smart. She's poor. She's got no connections, no money. She's the niece of a local clergyman in Hertfordshire. Except that this time she has met her biological father. And spoiler alert, she is the daughter of a mistress of a lord, basically. And so it's like she's now got access to lovely, high-powered aristocratic people, but she's still illegitimate. So there's that. It's not great. But the story begins where her father wants to do right by her. He doesn't want to acknowledge her formally because he's got a wife and legitimate kids who don't know about her existence. But he still, she looks like her mom. He loved her mom for decades. And so he wants to give her the gift of a London season. And he's willing to finance that, which is lovely. Now, at the time, we know that, prosperous young women with social connections and money, they would have been introduced to the Queen. But Poppy cannot because she is, poor and illegitimate and all that jazz, which isn't great. So that's not going to happen, but she can still kind of attend some of the parties and interact. And for me, this novel is really fun to research because, we hear a lot about Almack's as the place to go if you're a debutante of that time period. If you're going to go have a London season, you've got to go to Almack's, right? Not going to happen here. And so what I did, I researched, so what else was going on at that time that this book is set? It's pre-Regency. So it's still late Georgian era, 1807. And so I was looking at old historical newspapers at the time. And I discovered the Fashionable Institution, where it was it existed. It was a building where these lavish parties were held, and it was on Argyle Street in London. And you can still find the newspaper like mentions of it, which is just
Wow.
great. Yeah. And so I've got little clippings that I was like reading. And
That's
so you
so
can
cool.
find, what was happening at what day at time at this place. And it's so cool. And that's the exciting part about writing historical fiction and then adding in a bit of murder. So it's a mystery as well. And so in the story, Poppy, she makes some friends. She finds a way to get into these parties at the fashionable institution. But there's...
So it was really called the Fashionable Institution.
Pardon?
It was really called the Fashionable Institution?
Yeah.
That's a bold name.
I got it wrong, and it's like the Fashionable Institute, but I'm pretty sure.
Well, that's close enough. The fashionable part's the bold part. So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the fact that this existed back then at that time period is huge. That's just, it's the start of like a little nugget of gold research, and then it leads you down a rabbit hole and you just go from there. But it was really fun to write. And the exciting thing is that, so Poppy is now out of Hertfordshire. She's in London. Fantastic. So now as writers, we can look at all these London sites. What was there at the time? What wasn't? What was it called? But yeah, there's this other internal issue, which is, she is madly in love with this sergeant now, Sergeant Dingley, who we've met throughout the series from book 1 onwards. And, finally, it seems like they might get together. They're interested in courting each other formally, which is great. However, Poppy's uncle, he's the clergyman, he has his own suitor in mind for Poppy. He wants her to, court for a decent length of time and marry Mr. Terence Tyrrell, because I love alliteration. And he wants her to marry his candidate, who is a very dull as ditchwater kind of clergyman student of his, who Poppy couldn't stand. But the only way that her uncle will allow her to have a London season is if she also allows herself to be courted by this Mr. Terence Tyrrell. And so there we have it. So now Poppy's in London, and she's doing her London season, and she's being courted by 2 men, only one of whom she likes. And meanwhile, there's murders going on, because who doesn't like that in a London season? So that's it. That's my novel.
That's the Deadly and the Debutante in the Deadly
That
Debutante.
is. And I don't know if you guys caught it, but I've actually made a historical inaccuracy with the title. So the term debutante wasn't actually used, if my etymology is correct, until 1817, so Regency era. So I've used it 10 years too early, but I'll make a note of that when I do, chats about this. But I just thought I'd flag that. It's one of those things where, did you know about it at the time? No. And then you find out later that it's historically inaccurate, and you're like, well, I like it so much and it fits. All right, I'll go with it. I'll put a note in the author's, historical note later on, because
Poppy can just be ahead of her time. That would be appropriate.
There we go. So. Yeah. So that's me. That's my novel. Thanks.
That sounds great. And how many more do we get after this one?
I'm writing the 5th book right now. So wish me luck, because it's one of those situations where you're writing it and you think you know what's going on. And then you're like, oh, now I don't know what's going on. I'm nuts. Oh, God. So wish me luck, honestly.
Well, best of luck. And we can't wait to read this one and that one as well.
Thank you very much.
Carol, you've got minstrel nights for us.
Yes.
This one is A Rose in Her Night.
Yes, that's right. I am coming to you from Western Australia, which is the other side of the world from most of you guys. And I was a bit terrified there was going to be a gap in, because there's half a world away, but there is no gap. So here we go.
Perfectly.
So my Minstrel Nights, this is book 2. I wrote the first book with no idea of a series. I just entered the Write Stuff competition, and then they wanted a series. So, oh dear, I've got to figure out what comes next. So I thought, well, I've got a minstrel. And this was the era when romance really began. Of course, people got romantic before then, but the idea of this romantic tale, courtly romance, is happening in my period, which is, in my case, 1367. It's when people used to, make up stories about romance and adventure, like King Arthur's tales, for example, and very often get these heroes who just see a lady and they fall in love at first sight. They just get a glimpse, They look at the window, there's this lady, and yep, they're in love. And then they go and have romantic adventures on that basis. So my hero believes this. He is a wildly romantic and, of course, incredibly handsome Frenchman, because all Frenchmen are romantic, of course. Phil might disagree. And so he believes a myth. He sings love songs. Well, I shouldn't say a myth. Maybe it does exist. So he
It's unlikely, though, the through the window and there goes your heart kind of thing does seem the stuff.
Yes.
More of songs than
If that was all that was involved, it'd be a very short romantic story. So he thinks he's in love with the heroine. So he goes off to woo her and make her his own. And she's just not having a bar of it. She's been bitten once before. She's been married to a wildly handsome and romantic Frenchman who then went and got romantic with a lot of other ladies too. So basically, she doesn't believe in love. She thinks, oh, it's just something that happens for a few weeks and then it just goes away. So she believes in lust. She doesn't believe in love. So my wildly romantic French vicomte has to sneak into her castle under the disguise of a minstrel. And he has to try and woo her under this disguise. And everybody knows back then that minstrels have very loose morals. My heroine doesn't want anything to do with French noblemen, but she sees this rather tasty French minstrel and she thinks, well, maybe she could have a bit of a fling with him. You know, minstrels.
I love this.
She thinks he's quite nice, but of course minstrels just go away. He's expendable.
No commitment, just the fun.
Yeah. But of course that's not actually what's going on. He doesn't want a bar of this situation. And so they've got some misunderstandings, and then just to throw a spanner in the works, a second suitor rocks up. He happens to be English and very, very handsome, and he's got the advantage of being English because she prefers Englishmen. She's had a bad innings with Frenchmen in the past. So now our poor romantic Viscount is caught between a prickly rose who won't have anything to do with him and her very persuasive English suitor who proceeds to lay siege to the castle. So you've now got...
Like for real, slay siege.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's not how you win a lady's heart. I mean, come on.
He thinks he might starve her into submission. So he tells her that you prefer not to marry a skeleton. Very romantic of him. So you've got a hero who believes in love and a heroine who believes in lust, and they have to come to some kind of understanding, and I'll leave it to your imagination where it might go from there.
Oh, it sounds like so much fun. And I love the fact that she's the one who's not going to jump.
Oh, no.
He's got to work for it. Although the siege is, that's more work than I expected. So it sounds like so much fun. And I didn't put it together ahead of time, but Cara and Phil, you were both right stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Phil came first and I came second.
That's fantastic. I don't know why I didn't connect it in my head, but that's fantastic. So the next book this week, smack dab in the middle, is Alanna Lucas's, and it's the first book in the Three Graces series, and
Yes.
It's Most Improper Duchess. And I try to make her the most important every time I write it out for myself. She's a most important duchess, but she is a most improper duchess.
Yes, she's a very most improper duchess. So I'm coming to you from California. So hello, it's morning here where it's midnight where Cara is. So we are really across the whole world. So this series kind of started, one of my favorite sculptors is Canova, and so I love the Three Graces, and I always had this idea about the three Graces being sisters and kind of their tales in the London season. So it kind of started, with this art piece and kind of developed from there. And so in the first book, it's really about how they traverse through the season. And their beginning is not like most, debutantes. I can use that term because I'm in the Regency, so I'm proper in that terminology. But they had been caring for their parents, and so they didn't really have the same experiences as a lot of other young ladies. Their parents kind of let them be free spirits in the country, but they were also caring. They had a very loving, very close-knit family unit. And so first their mom took ill, and it was the sisters kind of rallying behind their mom, caring for her. And then when the mom passed away, their father, he had a mental illness. And so it's talked about in the book and how he's slowly succumbing to the, kind of the demons in his head, the loss of his wife. And really it's about having like what we would define today as like maybe Alzheimer's or something like that. And the youngest sister, she really was very close to her father. Her book is actually book 2, but it's how these sisters now, they feel kind of a little bit alone in the world. It's just the 3 of them, and now they have to go into the London season. Their great aunt is kind of helping them through it. And their great aunt gives them these beautiful love letters that were written between their mother and their father. And in those letters, they discover just this passion. And there's some things that you don't see it on the page. It's kind of left to your imagination what's contained into the love letters. But the girls are just like, oh my gosh, like what happened between our parents? Leave it to the reader's imagination. Let them fill in how intimate or scandalous, all of that is. But what they learn from these letters is they want that same kind of passion. And in their first few outings, in the London season, they're realizing that there's kind of, what's dictated to young ladies. You have to look a certain way, you have to dress a certain way, you have to act a certain way. There's all these rules about what you can and cannot do. And they decide that they want more. They want to know more. But with their friends, they keep on asking, well, what does your mom say about what to expect? And what is this? So everything is so guarded about what happens once you're married. Everything comes down to what duty, if you're the daughter of a duke, you're expected to marry in that social realm. If you're the daughter of a baron, how far can you push the boundaries and everything? And so, but it's all about the structure of society, and they don't want that. They want to delve deeper. So they create their own salon to kind of experiment and, find out more about it. And the hero in book 1, he's a duke, and he happens to be very good friends. He knew the family so this is a friends to lover kind of story. Knows the family and all of that. And so Alexandra, she enlists his help to kind of, navigate through the system. And he's very prim, he's very proper, and he's way over his head with all the things. And she gets into a lot of interesting situations, and she likes to sneak into places, and she wants to see how men live and what their experiences are. So she likes to dress as a guy sometimes and sneak into places she probably shouldn't. She has a lot of fun with it. So yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds great. And so I'm assuming that the next 2 books are the rest of the sisters.
Yeah, the next 2 books I just turned in book 2, which is Never Judge a Beast by His Cover. And the best way to describe it is kind of think of a little bit of Phantom of the Opera-ish in that sense. My hero, he was scarred. He wears a mask, and he absolutely adores music, which the heroine Theodora in that story does. And now I'm working on the 3rd book in the series, which is so it's kind of funny. I think we're of the age we all kind of maybe remember the song Blame It on the Rain, Milli Vanilli. I know there's like the whole scandal behind it, but it's Blame It on Lord Rain.
Oh,
and
cool.
So kind of off of that song was like playing in my head and everything when that coming together. They're being a little bit more stubborn right now, just because they really don't want to admit how much they like each other. And so they just are giving me so much trouble right now. Yeah. So this is the first. Most Improper Duchess is the first of the series. And it's been a lot of fun, with the sisters in their journey through what they're trying to discover. The salon is really established in the first book. In the second, it's there, but they're removed from London. The focus really becomes more the hero and his journey. And in the third book, we're right back in the salon because, well, she's stubborn and she's like, this can't be my lot in life. I want more. So it's been an interesting journey with them.
Fun. Well, the whole thing sounds interesting, and it leads really well into Jenny's book, which is also about women who push the boundaries of things. It's the Covert Ladies Academy. It's the third book in that series, and it's how to win the. I got to look at it again. Winning the Covert Lady's heart, not how to. Winning the Covert Lady's heart. Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yes. So my series is about a group of proper women in England who are doing charity work in this very benign organization, but it turns out that's just a cover. They're really part of this secret academy. And so they have the opportunity to do the things that proper women normally wouldn't be able to do. So in book 1, she's a fencer. In book 2, she does botany and kind of accidentally makes pepper spray, which I stretched the history a little bit with that, and uses it for self-defense. And then in book 3, she's a political writer, and she writes anonymous political essays for the newspaper. And so it starts off with her having to go to Westminster, where the House of Lords met, to do some paperwork for her organization, and she ends up kind of getting pulled into a protest that's happening there, and she accidentally gets caught up with this group of lady reformers and sent to Newgate Prison. Oops. Oh. And while she's there in prison for just a little while, she makes friends with these women, and they had come down from a town, and this was actually really fun to research. I think we know a lot about the suffragist movement in the Victorian era, but that was really started by the female reform societies of the Regency period. So groups of women, usually like working class, farmers, mining towns, would come together to work for universal male suffrage, because at this time, only about 11% of men were allowed to vote, even because you had to have property and be wealthy. And so they were fighting for universal male suffrage, for women's suffrage, and for the repeal of the Corn Laws, which really restricted basically how much food England was able to import. And so people were literally going hungry at this time. So they really felt like the government was not for them, which was kind of fun. My book came out on 4th of July, which is the American birthday celebration. So it was fun to reflect a little bit about a part of government is calling out your government for not serving you, and for fighting for equality and for all citizens to have a voice in it. So my heroine gets kind of caught up in this group, and they're like, oh gosh, we wish someone could maybe write some political pamphlets for us. And she's like, oh, I might know a person.
I feel like we have that need filled.
Yes. And so her brother's out of town. So she's like, how can we get out of prison? And so her brother's best friend, who has been very sternly warned off from our heroine, is asked to come and post bail. So he gets her out of Newgate and then she's like, oh, by the way, you got to get my friends out too. And then he wants to make sure that everything is proper and that she's safe. And so he's like, well, if they're staying in your home, because she's like, come stay with me, my brother's not here, he won't know. If the reformers come to his house, and the brother's friend is like, well, I need to keep an eye on things because we don't know these people, they could be murderers. Meanwhile, it's like women with children and grandmothers and
not
stuff.
Murderers.
He's like, so I need to stay at your house. And she's like, okay, well, let's make a deal. You help me and the reformers, and in exchange, I'll help you, because he had a bit of a reputation problem that was affecting his sister's ability to go out and find suitors. And so she says, I'll give you a reputation makeover. So my story has, a little arrangement, a little deal between the hero and heroine. It's got, the forbidden friend's brother.
You got brother's best friend, the reciprocal relationship, and only one house, which is not only one bed,
Only
but
one house, which eventually we do get to an only one bed situation, which is one of my very favorite tropes. So this is the conclusion to this trilogy, and so I get to bring in all the characters at the end. And of course, you can read it as a standalone, but I just had so much fun writing this series. It was really great.
No, it sounds like fun, and I love when we get everybody back together again. You know, when you have a chance to see all the characters that you've already fallen in love with.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, ladies, that was a delight. We could talk for a lot longer. We could talk about fencing. We could talk about swords because there's some crossover here. We could talk more about the time zones, but we are out of time. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. This was great. This is great, and we have a full house of books. So if it doesn't matter what you like to read. You'll find something that you like to read out of this week's offerings. So I'm going to make sure I put the links to all the books in the comments. So if you haven't got them yet, you can grab them. You want to get your Dragonblade books on pre-order and release because they are the very best deal then. But they're always available in Kindle Unlimited. So if you're not fast enough, you can read them that way too. So,
thank you.
Thanks again for taking the time, ladies. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
who do we have?
Yes.
Oh, it's so cute. It's really so you have somebody running around behind too. Well,
Thanks.
Cara, did you want to say something?
No.
Oh, well, it was great having a chance to talk to you all. I really appreciate you working with within the time zone things. As I said in the beginning, when you guys all went around, we are spread all over the place this week. So it was lovely to talk to you, and we will be back here the same time next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.